So welcome everyone. VR and AR, or what we like to call it as XR, which is really the combination of all the Rs, MR, AR, VR, and these might be terms that you are confused by. I'm not sure how novice this audience is, but we're going to get into lots of different flavors of XR. How it pertains to local commerce is a big question mark. But before we do that, and before we go deep with our panel, I thought I would set the stage with some definitions and market sizing. If we could get that presentation up. So this is data from my firm, ARtillry Intelligence, that looks at the overall XR spectrum. So that includes VR, AR, and the consumer and enterprise segments of each of those. And all together, it's very broad. It's reaching about 61 billion by 2021. That may seem like a lot, and it is. That's actually a lot lower than a lot of firms are predicting. And it's also very broadly applicable. And in 2019, we're going to see an inflection, largely driven throughout the forecast period by that big blue bar, which is essentially enterprise AR. So what is that? That is companies that have a variety of functions. It can be maintenance, it can be manufacturing, assembly, training. A lot of these things are going to be assisted by augmented reality. So one example is Boeing uses AR. It outfits a lot of its engineers with AR glasses to essentially assemble the wire harness of their fuselages. So they have been able to find that there's a 30% boost in efficiency and ROI in the form of saved time on project and error reduction. So this is going to be so big because of, one, that kind of clear ROI story in a lot of these enterprise verticals, anywhere where you can be kind of hands-free. And then number two, the total addressable market is going to be so broad because we're talking about everything from medical professionals to mail carriers, anything that can be advantaged by having a hands-free or moving on from paper documentation. And again, the ROI, the use cases I'm seeing by talking to companies like Intel and Boeing and Coca-Cola is that they're seeing anywhere from 15 to 45% efficiency gains in the form of either time or error reduction in a lot of their processes. So it's a pretty clear ROI formula. So that's the bulk of the market. Today we're going to talk about a lot of the consumer use cases because that's more conducive to local commerce, but that's a frame of reference in terms of the market size. So what we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, we will get into the enterprise stuff, but we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this smaller but still significant chunk of the XR spectrum, which is consumer AR. Now, instead of glasses, which is going to be prevalent in the enterprise as I just kind of went through, the total addressable market there is actually being driven by the 3.5 billion smartphones on the planet, and 500 million of them that are now compatible with AR, thanks to Apple's AR Kit and Google's AR Core, which are the development kits that allow any developer to build AR apps. Now, we're also, in addition to that, seeing some business models being validated. Pokemon Go alone, through in-app purchases, made almost $1 billion in 2016. This year, they're launching their follow-up game, which is built on the same game mechanics and architecture as Pokemon Go, but it's reskinned with a Harry Potter theme. So that's where we get into some of the local use cases. That's going to be a lot of in-app purchases, but there's also a lot of potential for driving local commerce through various kind of parts of the consideration cycle for consumers. So a few quick examples before we move on to our panel. This is Google Lens. This is a cousin of AR, which shares a lot of the underlying computer vision and object recognition, which are kind of key tenets of true augmented reality. Now, what Google is doing is using this to essentially point your phone at something to gain information. So it's basically a search. Instead of a typed query, it's really a visual query. And the way they're doing this is essentially querying their database of Street View imagery and GMB data and other data sets that they have to really build kind of a search experience that is based more on the camera and based more on visual than it is on typing. So it's very millennial friendly and conducive to a lot of user behavior we see there. This is actually currently in early stage. This is a concept video. It's currently available through Google Assistant on Pixel phones. Very early stage, but something that shows a lot of promise in terms of that local connection. This is something that's actually here today. And Rafael is going to be able to talk about this. So this is BMW I Visualizer. This is an AR Kit app. You can get it on the iPhone. Some of you may have seen this. You can essentially, if you're car shopping or just kind of kicking the tires, so to speak, drop a BMW into your driveway or garage, or in this case, it looks like they put it in their living room for some reason, and test out different colors, interiors. It has the positional accuracy and the dimensional accuracy to walk around the car with your phone. So it's clearly some implications there for being a valuable tool in the consideration cycle for what is inherently a local purchase, a high-ticket item. And these are just kind of two examples, and there are so many. These are just representative examples of some of the things we're going to talk about. These guys are all attacking this from different angles throughout the enterprise and consumer spectrum, but just some definitions to set the table. So now why don't we do some introductions. So I'll have each of you guys introduce yourselves briefly and your company and your role, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into what you're all doing. So Joel, why don't you go first?
Hi, how you doing? Joel Vasquez representing Tailspin, and we're focused on enterprise for augmented reality and virtual reality. A lot of training, a lot of consumer, just a lot of different kind of aspects, a lot of verticals in that nature. Prior to that, I was one of the co-founders for a company called ARtillry, also focusing on enterprise solutions for hardware and software. I've been in the industry for about 8 years now. Really just kind of excited to now see this adoption of so many people kind of taking this to a new level and start seeing the different experiences and apps that are available now. That's in a nutshell.
Rafaela?
Rafaela Camera with Accenture Extended Reality Practice. It's a new practice we launched in October. We only work on AR and VR, so augmented reality or virtual reality, both on the enterprise side and consumer side, and I can talk about that a little bit further later. I head up North America for what we consider go-to-market, so the definition of opportunities, working with clients, and also working with external partners to create demos, POCs, or form partnerships.
Excellent. Danny?
Danny Gordon, and I'm the CEO of ARtillry, which is a company with a platform called Augie Dish. And basically what we do is we basically infuse augmented reality into the dining experience. So think your menus, your ingredients, your ordering all coming to life via a lens, which obviously is your mobile phone. Before that, I founded and was a CEO of a company called Culture Sphere. And before that, I was in the hedge fund space, and I was just telling Mike, it's crazy that, we're seeing so many well-dressed people here, and I just kind of came in a non-finance t-shirt, but.
Hi, I'm Eva Haining. I lead up a new content production team called Light Lodges, working in mixed reality. We also do VR, AR, 360, immersive and interactive experiences, and now bridging to television and figuring out how pieces are going to work across these platforms. I previously led a special effects company down the street, so we've built early prototypes for ARtillry and other teams. I've been in the virtual production space now for about 12 years, and figuring out how all of these pieces are going to work with great startups like some of yours is what I do as a consultant.
So in terms of, speaking of the pieces, where they fit, I gave a few examples here, and the XR spectrum is very broad, lots of different types of use cases. So I'd like each of you to talk about kind of where you fit in that spectrum. I mean, those of you that kind of work with clients on their integrations, you probably have many answers to that question. So maybe one or two examples of the types of things you've done in the XR world, but also what's the ROI for the client, or Danny in your case, for working with restaurants? What's the value proposition for them in terms of either gaining new customers or having deeper integrations and relationships with their existing customers, or what are they looking for? What are you selling to them in terms of like a payoff for them? Go ahead, Joel, you can start.
Yeah, I'll take the first. So at Tailspin, we recently launched our initiative with Farmers Insurance and did a training simulation for their environment, what a worker would look like, and just kind of really just experiment and the immersive nature to that. And what the ROI was exponential on all categories. It decreased the time for training, it decreased so many different errors that are possible with that. Yep. Now it's a more gamified experience, and people kind of shy away from that term gamified. But as we all know, that's more of where we kind of wanted to get to. Work should be about having fun and really liking and enjoying what you're doing, and seeing the employees taking to that experience, and just with everybody with a smile on their face. That ROI alone, I would say, is just plenty worth it. Seeing, employee retention, keeping up to date with the standards that are kind of happening.
And time
And
as a metric, yeah.
Exactly.
Now, before we move on, walk us through that, like the actual, when you say training, is this kind of like agents training to say the right thing in front of a client, or what are we talking about with training?
So, for instance, there would be a use case where it's like there's water damage or something in a home, and a employee would have to go there, assess the situation, see what's wrong, and take through that whole experience, and through an experience where you can kind of see where it was, where it kind of originated, maybe the bathroom, maybe the kitchen, or anything like that. And that's where where VR actually kind of stands apart from AR, is that you're now immersed in this world as opposed to now superimposing the AR into the world. And you can, and it's a more immersive experience, obviously, because now it's in that environment.
And training makes a lot of sense there. Some of you may have heard that Walmart has adopted VR in terms of training its employees prior to Black Friday, and I don't know, like how to avoid a stampede, or I'm not sure what their
There's
training
so many
was.
different variables that
yeah.
go on, and it's almost nearly impossible to kind of dictate through textbook
Sure.
or classes. And again, speeding up the time and also incorporating those variables that you'll never be able to get anywhere else.
Now, previous to that, just to dwell on that one more minute in terms of the time and the ROI, what was the previous proposition? Were employees the more time through the training, but also did they have to like fly to a corporate headquarters, or were they able to do that locally? Is there a remote advantage that the immersiveness brings?
Somebody else want to take?
I can take that one.
Go for it.
So I was doing mixed reality for State Department under the early Obama administration. And so this was 2009. Obama would come in, give a talk, and we'd bring diplomats from all over the world into a virtual experience where they could have the diplomatic conversations needed without flying all over the world. And in a single experience, they would save over $1 million because 50 people plus their entourages flying to a single location was always going to be cost prohibitive for them.
Interesting. So, Rafaela, back to the question of ROI, any of the clients you've had, whether it be BMW or you've done some stuff with Walmart and fashion shows, or any example you want to choose, where are you seeing kind of the ROI that they're seeing? Why are they adopting?
Yeah, and I think the ROI is a little bit different if you're thinking about a consumer application
Sure.
or an enterprise application.
It
so
is.
in the case, for example, of the BMW I visualizer, the issue really was how do we get millennials who hate going to a dealership and dealing with car salesmen. How do you get them to interact with the model and with the car? And that was a way to do it. So you can configure it. You can get into the car. You can look at the details. You can almost sit inside the car, configure it whichever way you want. You can share the pictures with your friends and social media and anything else like that. And then you can move that exact configuration on the web. So for them, that was what they were looking for. It's doing really well. We built it first in Tango and then an Air kit, and now we're working on putting an Air core. And we added all of the I models for BMW. We also did it in a way that it dynamically renders the types of models, the types of configurations you can have based on where the user is at geographically, in what country it is. So that's the type of ROI they're looking for. If you're looking at things that are a little bit more enterprise-centric, anything from retailers wanting to build their stores in virtual reality before they actually build them in real life, so that they can see how things really look. If you have customers go through it in virtual reality, you can see where they look, where they don't look, where they stop. They can interact with the products. You can see if they can reach them and all that. And also you can bring multiple people and avatars into the same space from different parts of the world and work on it at the same time, be it the designing of the product or the designing of the store itself. So without giving exact numbers, it's clear to understand how you decrease the costs and how you go faster.
And for a lot of the reasons you just mentioned, I could picture being in commercial real estate or architects to be able to have an immersive walkthrough of a building where the buyer can actually make decisions on the spot in that virtual environment. And quickly back to BMW, one thing that you mentioned which is interesting is not only is it kind of have the novelty appeal and the millennial appeal of kind of configuring the car, but then the flow of that and the call to action to go online to an actual like purchase thread, it's probably too early to tell, but the analytics behind that will probably be clear about kind of tracking the path to purchase.
Yeah, and actually the way that it's built, you don't even have to push it online. It automatically tracks it. So if you end up being on the web later on, it just remembers what you did.
Yeah, interesting. So Danny, same question about ROI. What's your value proposition to the restaurants?
Yeah, so we have obviously a two-sided market. We, clearly want to please the restaurants, but we also want to please the users. On the restaurant side, there's a lot of potential for a brand new customer experience, right? A lot of these menus, unless you're at the fast food places, obviously they have pictures everywhere. But the only way to kind of see menus and all the pictures, see menus and the pictures, and obviously be able to see dish sizes and quantity sizes and be able to customize, I want this ingredient, I want that ingredient, I don't want this one. You don't really have that capability in today's world. So being able to actually physically do that via your phone, just with a couple touches of a button, is kind of what we bring to the customer experience side of the equation. We also see, unfortunately, we obviously kind of know that the service industry, in the next 5 to 10 years is probably going to slowly dwindle away. So we're also talking to restaurants about, a couple clicks and boom, it hits the kitchen. And obviously that would probably speed up the table turning in about 10 to 15% of the time they would spend. On the consumer side, really, it's unbelievable the amount of excitement that when we show people these dishes and they literally look like the dishes that are in front of you just through the lens of a phone, just the excitement they get out of it, sharing it on social media, that obviously creates a great branding and a great advertising experience for the restaurants as well.
So we can move from Instagram pictures of food to Instagram pictures of animated food.
Yeah, exactly. So we have we're tied in with a couple pretty big social media celebrities. Yeah. And, they have content that they literally spend all day trying to create, what's the best thing to make this video go viral. So we've been talking to some and they even see it as like a prop, right? They could place like 5 different dishes on the table, customize some stuff and use that in like a 30-second or a 1-minute skit. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of promise in that social advertising space, utilizing Instagram, obviously.
And a lot of restaurants are already evolving towards kind of tablets at the table for ordering, which cuts down on a lot of either human error or time or things like that. So It's really like that on steroids.
Yeah, so there's a company, actually, the founder, it's called E La Carte, and they're up in Palo Alto. And they basically they had a really good run with Applebee's where there was tablets on the table, but it was great for the restaurants. But the consumer side, you would have to wash it, and every single day, 50, 100 parties were touching it. Everyone has one of these in their pocket, right? And this is kind of quote unquote your baby, right? So hold on, taking some time. So literally being able to pull this out, we geofence where you are in the world, and then project those hologram 3D models of that restaurant's dishes that you can use this instead of kind of like a table side tablet. So we're talking about maybe initially when you go into the restaurant, there might be a tablet kind of at the lobby or at the entrance. Yeah. But having it physically on your phone it's a different feel and a different customer experience.
And before we move on to Eva, how are you getting those creative assets? Like a hamburger that spins around in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a rock star, young, hungry, diverse team of amazing designers and developers. And to create these photorealistic dishes, you use a process called photogrammetry. And our lead on that is a one of a kind. And you basically go into a restaurant, and you put a dish in a light box, and you shoot 360-degree photos. And then it's all about, the novelty of utilizing all those photos to create the 3D model via computer programming. So it's not an easy skill to master, but luckily I'm excited that we have that in-house.
Well, the better computer vision and depth cameras get in future versions of iPhones, you might be able to crowdsource some of that.
Right. And I mean, just to kind of touch on that, I mean, obviously Snapchat basically brought kind of AR into the public perception with their spitting rainbows and their dog ears, but those still look very cartoony, right? When you look at the dishes that we create, it's literally you're seeing detailed, the lettuce, the tomatoes, so again, it takes a long process, but hopefully that'll, get quicker and quicker as the technology gets better and better.
So Ivo, same question about examples of projects and ROI that you saw from that, or they saw from that.
It sounds like some of the same process we're seeing as well, except on a storytelling side, we're doing those scans of real beings. And as we begin to create storytelling statues, for example, bringing history to life in the city, bringing tour guides who can be in front of your store and help guide people in, right? Being able to scan over a poster or anything on the city block and have that begin to open up an experience that's very realistic, that's a short video, under a minute. We're seeing tremendous excitement for that, figuring out exactly the value of that interaction and being able to sell that to the city level, the local level. We're excited to see more numbers on that, but to be honest, we don't have what is the ROI for a local business versus a national business? Or for a city, we've seen tremendous city use, not just in storytelling, but also in simulation and getting people excited about doing things together. But what real value does that create for the city? We're still waiting on those numbers.
Now, moving from the value of the entity, the enterprise, who's ever integrating AR in some way to deepen the relationship with their customers, let's talk about those customers, those end users. And Danny, you got into some of that. The value of being able to see your food visualized in front of you or see your BMW in your driveway. Is there any other trending you guys are seeing? Because it is very early. The uptake is still very slow. And Evo, you brought up the great distinction earlier between glasses-based AR and mobile-based AR, especially on the consumer end. So what are you guys each seeing or learning in terms of the end user consumer demand? Any interesting trending, anything that you guys are seeing that indicates there's opportunity beyond the value proposition to the entity?
Well, we strongly believe in mobile VR or any form of mobile experience more than anything else.
Yep.
And we see not only OEMs, but experiences in general moving that way. So by mobile, what we mean is that there is nothing attached to a computer or anything else. You can move
Untethered.
freely, and you have 360 degrees of freedom, basically. You can do whatever you want with it. And also this idea of having headsets that are just in one piece. You don't have to slide anything in. You can do everything with it. I think what we're also noticing more and more is this idea of getting away from putting the technology first. So instead of just wanting to do something in AR or VR, really figuring out what is the story that we're trying to tell, and does that story fit augmented reality? Does it fit virtual reality? And then even within that, does it fit a computer graphics or CG-based experience, or does it fit more a 360 experience? And how do you want to build that out? So even we built something for in connection with an event that we did with Walmart that was supposed to show the commerce of the future in virtual reality, or one way that could be done. And even for that, we stepped back and we first built the story, and then around the story and the storyline, think of it as a video or as an ad. Then we built the interactivity, the gaze-based elements, all of the VR functionality behind it. Otherwise, it was not going to stick and stay. And if people get bored or they think that it's just another gimmicky thing, they're not going to do it, and it's going to fall flat. So I think people are starting to see that, and they're starting.
So we actually have a video that demonstrates some of that I want to go to in a minute. But first, I want to focus on your point, which I think is an important one, which is don't go at it technology first or technology for the sake of technology,
right.
But really, I like to say, solve human problems, not engineering problems. As really picture yourself the practical use case of the end user, and not just, hey, we want to check that VR box. Eva, look like you want to respond to that.
For the next 2 years at least, the mobile AR experience is going to continue to drive, because the consumer market for smart glasses and anything without a cord is just starting to hit America. It's been out in Asia for over a year. ODG has been making smart glasses for cops and military here for a long time, but we haven't seen that trickle down to the consumer market yet. So when I'm working with design teams and we say, okay, how do we want to implement? I love smart glasses, and I design for them now, thinking ahead for 2 years from now. But realistically, I have to have the phone be the primary interaction.
It's a stylistic thing. I mean, they're not stylistically, I mentioned it earlier, cost, stylistic, battery drain, not sleek enough for mainstream consumer use. There's a lot of rumors about Apple with 2020 timeframe coming out with glasses, and they could have the Apple classic halo effect and push that forward. But until then, we're very much talking about a mobile-oriented solution, at least on the consumer side. Go ahead, Joel, and then Danny.
I'll kind of touch on that point. I mean, Rafael heard so many great points, focusing on the gimmicky nature of it. What does it solve, the end user? And just, I think, bringing up ARtillry, they're focusing on glasses for enterprise.
That's where
then it'll funnel to consumer. You got to, and that happens with a lot of things, telecommuting, enterprise, then to consumer. And that's kind of, even VR for that matter, we have to realize a lot of kind of gaming technologies which started off in the arcade, and then it came to home with the PlayStation, Xbox, have you, And now we're starting to see that, oh, okay, maybe we should have a VR station, location-based entertainment.
Yes.
And then also with augmented reality, I think it's gotten to that point now where the magic of it has gone away, right? You can't focus on the technology. You're never going to have really ongoing experience with that. Or what's the ROI? Why do I need that? There is none of that when you focus on the tech itself. But when you start incorporating, oh, okay, it's actually saving time. It's actually giving me instant information, making me an instant expert. Then we start seeing this transition of it's a medium. It's not necessarily a magic trick or whatever. These are just mediums that are just starting to take off.
Yeah.
And people are now kind of taking notice. The big boys are now playing, as you said, Apple, Google. And now I think we're going to start seeing the shift of artists being able to explore in this area, and we'll start seeing more engaging experiences and better ROI.
So Danny, before you respond, I want to say something about that, because one kind of virtue I always espouse when talking to companies is native thinking. So think natively for the form factor as opposed to taking the previous form factor and shoving it. And we learned that lesson in 2007, 2008 with the smartphone, where we saw the first round of like fart apps, and all of these things are basically just brochureware. As opposed to eventually getting to something like Uber that is really, it was just mobile only. It wasn't even mobile first, it was mobile only. So it's that learning curve of like mobile apps and being native and getting to that point of, you know, what's going to be the first breakout, what's going to be the Uber of the mobile apps. It would not work on the previous medium as just a normal smartphone app. And I think that's going to be the moment where it really starts to take off. But that's a very good point. Danny, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I mean, everyone, all my panelists said, you know, really, really good points. I'll actually take the other side of the time frame. I personally don't think smart glasses, contacts are mainstream. Like every single one of us has one of these for at least 7 to 10 years.
Yep.
Even if you think about the iPhone, right? It really went mainstream on the 4S, which was 2011, right? So it came out in 2007, and it took about 4 years. And especially, at least, you know, speaking to myself for myself and my company in the restaurant industry, no one's going to be in restaurants with glasses on trying to order, right? So on the enterprise side, where, you know, Mike's point about the style, it doesn't really matter. You know, Joel's previous company, ARtillry, they have an awesome helmet that helps construction workers, you know, physically know where to put stuff. So for the enterprise, I mean, it's probably coming the next 2 to 3 years where every enterprise has some type of helmet or glasses. But until the form factor is really down to close to like even contacts or something, no one's gonna be like, ooh, I forgot my glasses in the house. Let me go walk around and experience AR.
It's true, and before you go, Ivo, there are some consumer niches where we're seeing, if you're already wearing some form of glasses, so cycling,
right,
skiing, things like that, we're going to start to see some integrations.
Just, yeah, general population walking around
right
on the street.
Yeah.
Like how we see everyone with their phones going like this.
Smartphone level scale.
Yeah.
Like 3.5 billion global units.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's like end of 2020s.
Right.
You know?
Absolutely. And at the same time, though, there's a startup here in town that's got prescription glasses that do most of what the AR devices can do. And so there will be opportunities to jump in pretty soon and begin experimenting at the consumer level. So if you're trying to figure out, well, where do we play in this space? Run experiments and try new things and get some research and do things side by side and see what works.
Yeah, so that's actually was going to be the last round of questions. I want to go down the line, which is like, what's your final parting advice, mistakes you've seen made from people that are either tire kickers or really getting into AR or VR integrations? What's your kind of parting advice for these guys? And we'll take that as your answer, Ivo. So Danny?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on Yvonne's great point. There's a lot of trial and error in this space right now, right? It's really new. It costs a good amount of money to create the content, to, you know, find the quickest way to get something out that's shippable. So there's a lot of trial and error. We're seeing, you know, just like the panelists said, the time to market is definitely, you know, longer than it should be, but we see in the next couple of years it getting, you know, faster and faster as adoption picks up.
To go back to his point, form factor, particularly for AR, it's extremely important. And I think one mistake, for example, that was made is this idea that, oh, moms are going to go to the store and they're going to point their phone to a box of cereal and see what's in it, and if there is a discount. No, they're not going to do that. You're not going to take the phone out and stop and your kids are running around or whatever else. So I think those are some of the things that we were thinking until there is a different form factor.
What I like to say is AR is a snack, VR is a meal. So don't build AR experiences that last more than 20 seconds of asking someone to do this, right? Joel?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I think my panelists just kind of touch on that point, but also that there's still a huge learning curve and a huge gap in between people that are in the space wanting to realize about it and then spending time so much building this huge campaign and not even realizing the UX about it.
Right.
And then so I would say if there's anybody out there that wants to kind of dive into it, start off small, do a nice little MVP and see if it works for you and start seeing the ROI that way.
Great advice.
Instead of taking months and months and months of pre-planning, which doesn't really work because the tech is going to change anyway. And as we start seeing the advancement of it, holographics are now a big play.
Yep.
Where eyewear might not even be an issue anymore. So that's the kind of thing where it's like, just start small, and that's just build from there.
Well, and we might, before we get to some of the hardware we're talking about, what might leapfrog that is just chips implanted that we can just see whatever we want, right? That was a joke. We've probably confused you guys more than anything, but we hope this has been helpful. And please join me in thanking the panel.